Have you ever looked at today's Middle East and wondered if the Bible saw it all coming? The wars, the alliances, the spiritual battles. It's not just politics. It might be prophecy. In this video, we'll explore what Ezekiel's ancient words reveal about the chaos, the hope, and the unfolding destiny of the Middle East today. Stick with us to the end, because what you'll discover may change how you see world events forever. Ezekiel's vision of dry bones, found in chapter 37 of his prophetic book, is one of the most powerful and symbolic messages in the entire Bible. The prophet is taken by the Spirit of the Lord to a valley filled with bones, completely dry and scattered. God asks Ezekiel, "Can these bones live?" To which Ezekiel responds, "Sovereign Lord, you alone know." This exchange sets the stage for a dramatic demonstration of God's power to restore life, not only physically but spiritually. The dry bones represent the whole house of Israel, a people who felt cut off, hopeless, and lifeless after generations of exile and oppression. Historically, Israel's identity was shattered by conquests, exiles, and the dispersion of its people across foreign lands. Ezekiel's prophecy came at a time when Judah had fallen to Babylon and the temple in Jerusalem had been destroyed. The Jewish people were in captivity, and hope for a return to their homeland seemed lost. In this vision, however, God commands Ezekiel to prophesy to the bones, and as he does, they begin to rattle, connect, and form skeletons. Flesh and skin cover them, but there is still no breath. God then instructs Ezekiel to call on the breath to come from the four winds and breathe into the slain. When he does, the bodies come to life and stand as a vast army. This breathtaking image is not merely about a return from exile. It foreshadows something far greater. The prophecy speaks of a national and spiritual revival. God declares that he will open the graves of his people and bring them back to the land of Israel. He will put his spirit in them so they may live. This isn't only about returning to a geographical location. It's about the restoration of identity, purpose, and divine relationship. Fast forward to modern times, and we see how remarkably this vision aligns with the rebirth of the nation of Israel in 1948. After nearly 2,000 years of diaspora, the Jewish people returned to their ancestral land. Out of the ashes of the Holocaust, against overwhelming odds, the state of Israel was established. Many see this event not just as a political milestone, but as a prophetic fulfillment. A nation, long thought dead, came back to life. But the prophecy of the dry bones doesn't stop at physical restoration. The vision is in two stages. First comes the assembling of the bones and the forming of bodies, a representation of national revival. Second comes the breath, the Spirit of God entering into the people, a symbol of spiritual renewal. Many scholars and believers interpret this to mean that while Israel has been physically restored as a nation, the spiritual awakening is still to come. In this way, Ezekiel's vision continues to unfold. The land of Israel is flourishing. Its people are returning from all corners of the earth. But the final fulfillment, the pouring out of God's Spirit and a turning of hearts toward Him, is a future promise. This dual-phase prophecy also speaks to a broader spiritual truth. Just as Israel was lifeless without the breath of God, so is any individual or nation that lacks the Spirit. Ezekiel's vision reminds us that real life, true identity, and lasting hope come only when the breath of God enters in. It's a powerful metaphor for a revival in our personal lives. When people feel like dry bones, hopeless, broken, scattered, God asks, "Can these bones live?" The answer lies not in human ability, but in divine power. This vision also ties deeply to Christian eschatology, where many see it as part of God's redemptive plan leading up to the return of the Messiah. The revival of Israel is seen as a significant signpost in the timeline of prophetic events. Therefore, Ezekiel 37 is more than a vision. It's a prophetic blueprint. It outlines God's heart for restoration, both of His people and of His relationship with them. It challenges us to believe in the impossible and to understand that what looks dead and hopeless in human eyes can be revived by the breath of God. This timeless message calls believers to recognize God's hand in history, to anticipate the completion of His promises, and to be spiritually awake as prophecy continues to unfold before our eyes. Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39 introduce a mysterious figure named Gog, of the land of Magog, who leads a coalition of nations in a future attack against Israel. This prophetic war, often referred to as the War of Gog and Magog, is one of the most debated and analyzed portions of biblical prophecy. According to Ezekiel, Gog is a leader from the far north, and he is accompanied by a group of allies including Persia, Cush, Put, Gomer, and Beth Togarmah. These ancient names are believed to correspond with modern nations such as Russia, Iran, Ethiopia, Libya, and parts of Turkey. Together, this alliance rises against a land that is described as having recovered from war, living in safety, and having unwalled villages, suggesting a time when Israel appears secure and prosperous. This prophecy becomes particularly significant when considered in light of modern geopolitical developments. In recent years, there has been a noticeable alignment of certain nations that echo Ezekiel's list. Russia has established a strong presence in the Middle East, particularly in Syria, just north of Israel. Iran, the modern name for Persia, has consistently shown hostility toward Israel and continues to back proxy groups across the region. Turkey has taken a more assertive role in regional politics and has strained relations with Israel. These nations, once without any clear unifying cause, are now seen as part of a growing axis of power with shared interests that increasingly place them at odds with Israel. Ezekiel's prophecy outlines not just the players involved, but also God's purpose behind allowing such a confrontation. The attack is not random or merely political. It is divinely orchestrated to bring about a dramatic revelation of God's power. God says that He will put hooks in Gog's jaws and lead him into battle. When this great army comes against Israel, God responds not with human defense, but with supernatural intervention. Earthquakes, torrential rains, hailstones, fire, and brimstone. The result is the utter defeat of the invading forces. The purpose behind this divine judgment is that the nations will know that God is the Lord. It is not merely a war for territory, but a stage set for the manifestation of God's glory before a watching world. This event is designed to show that God protects His people and fulfills His word. The prophecy is also a call to readiness. For students of prophecy, the alignment of nations and the movement of global powers should not be dismissed as mere coincidence. Rather, they are signs of a prophetic convergence, indicators that the events spoken of in Ezekiel may be nearer than many assume. However, it is important to note that the exact timing of the Gog and Magog war is debated among scholars. Some place it before the tribulation period, others in the middle, and some even at the end of the millennial reign of Christ, as referenced in Revelation 20. Regardless of the timing, the central theme remains that God is sovereign over history and the nations. Ezekiel 38 and 39 also reveal that after the defeat of Gog and his allies, it will take 7 months to bury the dead and 7 years to burn the weapons, emphasizing the scale of the destruction and the lasting impact of the event. The land of Israel will serve as the stage for a global turning point. This prophecy serves as a reminder that God's plans are far-reaching and involve not just Israel, but the entire world. It shows that even the most powerful alliances and militaries are no match for the hand of God. As tensions rise in the Middle East and global powers position themselves for influence, Ezekiel's prophecy becomes more relevant than ever. For believers, it is both a warning and a reassurance. A warning that the days ahead may bring great conflict, but a reassurance that God is ultimately in control. He allows events to unfold not randomly, but according to a divine script that has been written long ago. In the face of uncertainty, Ezekiel's vision offers confidence that God's purposes will prevail and that His people are never forgotten. Ezekiel's prophetic writings also shed light on the deep spiritual crisis underlying the turmoil in the Middle East. While political analysts and news reports often focus on territorial disputes, military alliances, and peace treaties, Ezekiel points to something far more foundational: the spiritual condition of the people and their relationship with God. In Ezekiel's time, the people of Israel had turned away from God, indulging in idolatry, injustice, and rebellion. This rebellion led to their exile and the destruction of Jerusalem, but God, through Ezekiel, promised eventual restoration. That restoration, however, was not just physical or national. It was deeply spiritual. Ezekiel 36 speaks of a time when God would cleanse His people from all impurities, give them a new heart, and put a new spirit within them. This transformation would not come through political reforms or military victories, but through a divine act of grace and renewal. Today, the Middle East remains a region filled with religious diversity, conflict, and competing ideologies. Judaism, Islam, and Christianity all have roots in this region, and their followers often find themselves in conflict, not just physically, but spiritually. Peace agreements have come and gone, with some offering temporary stability, such as the Abraham Accords, while others have failed to produce lasting results. The reason lies deeper than diplomacy. According to Ezekiel, true and lasting peace can only emerge when there is a change of heart, a turning back to God. The promise of a new heart and a new spirit speaks to the inner transformation required to bring real healing. This applies not just to Israel, but to the entire region and the world at large. The turmoil we witness in the Middle East is a reflection of a deeper spiritual unrest, a longing for truth, identity, and reconciliation with the Creator. Ezekiel also highlights the importance of God's name and His holiness. In chapter 36, God declares that He will act not just for Israel's sake, but to vindicate the holiness of His name, which had been profaned among the nations. This shows that God's actions in history are ultimately about revealing His character and drawing people back to Himself. As such, every event in the Middle East, no matter how chaotic it appears, serves a greater divine purpose. There is a spiritual drama unfolding behind the scenes, one in which God is calling both His people and the nations to recognize His sovereignty. In this context, the spiritual rebellion that Ezekiel condemned is not confined to ancient Israel. It is a condition that continues to plague humanity. Pride, idolatry, and the rejection of divine authority are still at the root of much of the conflict we see today. Without acknowledging and addressing these spiritual issues, any attempts at peace, are ultimately temporary. The vision of restoration that Ezekiel offers is one where God himself initiates the change. He will gather the scattered, cleanse them, and dwell among them. This points forward to a time of ultimate peace and spiritual harmony when God's presence will be fully manifest. It also speaks to the coming of the Messiah, through whom this spiritual renewal is made possible. Many interpret these promises as being partially fulfilled in the return of Israel to its land, but still awaiting full realization in a future spiritual revival. For believers today, Ezekiel's message is both a warning and a hope. It warns that without spiritual alignment with God, nations and individuals remain vulnerable to judgment and unrest. But it also offers hope that no matter how far people have strayed, restoration is possible through God's mercy. The key to peace in the Middle East is not just in treaties or borders, but in hearts transformed by God's Spirit. Ezekiel's prophecy remains a powerful reminder that the heart of every conflict is spiritual, and the solution must come from above. Ezekiel's prophetic revelations not only speak to ancient Israel and present-day geopolitical events, but also provide deep wisdom for believers today who seek to understand their place in a rapidly changing world. The core message throughout Ezekiel's writings emphasizes God's sovereignty, his commitment to his covenant, and his ultimate plan for restoration. For the modern believer, these themes are not abstract theological points, but guiding truths that can offer direction, hope, and purpose amid global instability. One of the most powerful takeaways from Ezekiel's prophecy is the assurance that God is always in control, even when circumstances appear chaotic. From the exile of Israel to the invasion of Gog and Magog, every event described is allowed or directed by God to accomplish his purposes. This speaks to a fundamental biblical principle that God uses the rise and fall of nations, the alliances of leaders, and even times of war to fulfill his divine plan. For believers today, watching the unrest in the Middle East and the shifting alliances of global powers, Ezekiel's words remind them not to be overwhelmed by fear or confusion. God has a plan that is unfolding according to his perfect timing. In times of uncertainty, faith is not just a spiritual exercise, but a necessary anchor. Ezekiel also reinforces the concept that God's covenant with his people is unbreakable, even when they are unfaithful. This reveals a profound truth about God's character. He is not only just, but also merciful. He disciplines with purpose, and he restores with love. The repeated promises of restoration in Ezekiel's prophecies demonstrate God's desire to bring his people back into right relationship with him. For Christians, this speaks to the faithfulness of God through Jesus Christ. Even when individuals or societies drift from God's ways, he is willing and ready to forgive, renew, and empower. This encourages believers to live in a way that reflects that covenant loyalty, to pursue holiness, to stand firm in truth, and to remain hopeful in God's promises. Another aspect of Ezekiel's wisdom is the focus on the internal transformation necessary for genuine spiritual renewal. The vision of God, giving his people a new heart and a new spirit, is not limited to Israel's future. It applies to every believer's journey. Without the Spirit of God, individuals are like the dry bones, lifeless and disconnected. But through the breath of God, through his Spirit, they are revived and made whole. This is the essence of Christian discipleship. Faith is not just about external observance or political alignment. It is about allowing the Spirit of God to reshape one's thoughts, attitudes, and actions. In an age where division, confusion, and fear dominate the headlines, Ezekiel calls believers to be spiritually alive, discerning, and grounded in God's truth. Moreover, Ezekiel's prophecies serve as a call to spiritual watchfulness. Jesus himself referenced the importance of knowing the signs of the times. Ezekiel's detailed visions, especially concerning the end times conflict involving Gog and Magog, encourage believers to remain vigilant and prayerful. Watching global events is not about speculation, but about spiritual readiness. The believer's role is not to predict exact dates or timelines, but to live faithfully, expecting the fulfillment of God's word and preparing hearts for what is to come. Finally, Ezekiel offers hope, not only for Israel and the Middle East, but for the entire world. The restoration that God promises includes peace, unity, and His presence dwelling among His people forever. For those who feel disillusioned by politics, discouraged by violence, or disconnected from faith, Ezekiel's message is a reminder that God's ultimate goal is redemption. The chaos of today is not the end. It is part of a divine narrative leading toward renewal and restoration. That future is promised to all who trust in Him. Ezekiel's wisdom urges modern believers not just to understand prophecy, but to live transformed lives, to intercede for the nations, and to walk in faith, knowing that every word God has spoken will come to pass.